We're more aware than ever of the impact we're having on our planet, and carbon offsetting promises a way to pay for a clear conscience. But can we really buy our way out of a climate catastrophe?
A lot of companies and individuals are worried about their carbon footprint, but there are some emissions that are just unavoidable. Carbon offsetting is a way of removing or avoiding CO2 being put into the atmosphere. There are two major ways we can do that. The first one is reforestation, whereby we actually plant trees and that sucks CO2 out of the atmosphere. The other way is to avoid emissions. So for example, we can pay countries to not deforest an area of land. We can also support renewable energy, which stops them emitting carbon through their fossil fuel energy generation.
When an offset project can show it's avoided or reduced CO2 or equivalent greenhouse gas emissions, it's awarded a carbon credit. Usually measured in metric tonnes, these can then be traded on a carbon market. Carbon markets emerged as a way for governments to comply with emissions targets, first drawn up under the Kyoto Protocol. Known as compliance markets, these operate using a legal framework, but the idea caught on, leading to voluntary markets for carbon offsetting.
The reason why it's really important that people are aware of this is because offsetting right now is being supercharged. And that's largely because businesses and governments across the world are feeling pressure from citizens, from campaigners, from their investors. In the voluntary carbon market space, there is very, very little regulation, if any. It is a sort of Wild West.
Amazon now has a goal to be net zero carbon by 2040.
Today, that means relying on high-quality carbon offset projects.
We're seeing big airlines telling their customers that they can fly guilt-free, they can fly carbon neutral. We're seeing all sorts of products being labelled carbon neutral.
We need to work really hard and tighten up the regulations to make sure that we can trust that an offset is a real offset. One of the key concepts is additionality. Does the money that you pay make the project happen? For example, in rich developed countries, renewable energy is going in anyway because it's cheaper than the fossil fuel alternative. Many people worry about permanence. We all know that if we plant a forest, then perhaps somebody 20 years into the future can come and cut it down. There is also an issue with leakage, which is if we save a forest, all that does is shift the deforestation and we have no net gain.
We can also see that most of the companies and governments that are relying on offsetting are based in the global north and trying to pass over that burden for countries in the global south. We're seeing a lot of companies relying on huge amounts of land that can lead to the erosion of land rights, particularly for indigenous communities. It can also have a really perverse impact on biodiversity because that priority is about how can we grow something that is going to absorb carbon.
So despite the challenges, can carbon offsetting help in averting a climate disaster?
As long as these projects are well regulated and are actually verified on a regular basis, they can be a really positive environmental change around the world. But they are not the solution. The solution to climate change is rapid decarbonisation of our energy systems.
One of the real dangers with offsetting is that delaying or undermining the reduction of emissions at source is putting us all at greater risk of climate breakdown.